Hello again. Okay, I've been seeing various videos here and there and articles that mention about the pagan community. The pagan community this and that, and people claiming to speak for the pagan community, etc., etc. So I thought I would do a video about this. Now, I'm going to talk mostly about Ireland because this is where I live, and I've been living here for over 20 years. I've been my life has revolved around Ireland to quite a large extent for the last 30 years. So I'd like to think I do know a little bit about what's happening here. And, I've been directly involved in paganism in Ireland and to some extent in the UK for, coming up for 30 years now. So, yeah, I would say there isn't really such a thing exactly as a pagan community. You have lots of little pagan communities, in my opinion. There isn't a kind of national or international or global pagan community as such. You get lots of people that sort of talk to each other, but you've got so many disparate groups. Talking about Ireland, which is what I know best, you have people who are interested in Celtic paganism. That might be Celtic shamanism, it might be Druidism, or it might just be sort of traditional Celtic culture, the oral tradition that's been passed down in sort of folk medicine, folk stories, etc. Sort of the sort of bardic tradition of Shanachie, etc. And that's sort of one particular area. And then you've also got Wicca, which is probably the largest element of paganism here. You've also got traditional witchcraft and sort of other forms of witchcraft, which I might not know about. And then, of course, there's Norse Paganism as well. Bearing in mind there's been a huge Viking influence on Ireland over more than 1,000 years. So, yeah, there's a lot of interest in that too. But I would say by far the biggest area, the biggest sector is people who are involved in Wicca, which, along with all the other forms that we currently have, is neo-paganism. According to the last census, I think there's around 10,000 people who call themselves pagans in Ireland. So there's probably a lot of people who didn't put anything down on the census, or they might have put something else. So there may be a lot more than that. It's really difficult to know. But it's a very small community. So, when people make videos about Ireland and they're talking about the Irish culture and, the ancient Ireland and paganism, what they're really talking about is neo-paganism, because I would say 95% or more of people in this country are neo-pagans. They don't come from a hereditary line. There's probably less than 1% of people who've got more than their parents before them who might have been pagan. The people who've got great-grandparents, etc., who were pagans, it's absolutely minuscule, tiny, tiny. Most people are first-generation pagans. There are some who are second-generation, and an infinitesimally small amount who go back further than that. And then you also need to bear in mind that the vast majority of people in Ireland do not speak the Irish language to any high degree. Everybody who goes to school here usually has to learn Irish. You could spend sort of 10 to 15 years learning Irish, but even so, most people don't speak it fluently. Most people only have a smattering, and cúpla focal, as the saying goes, a few words. And I think it's something less than 5% of people who are here are actually fluent in Irish. And I think the Gaeltacht areas, which is the Irish-speaking areas, are I think roughly around 2% of the country. So you'll get a lot of people making videos talking about Irish culture and Irish voices, appropriation, about this ancient Irish culture as if it was equivalent to, say, Native Americans or indigenous cultures like that are still actively pursuing their original culture. The situation here in Ireland isn't at all like that. Virtually everybody here speaks English as first or joint first language. There was a guy living on the Dingle Peninsula here who couldn't speak any English. He was the only person left who was an Irish-only speaker on the entire peninsula. He's now died. So there you go. It just shows you that, in modern Ireland, everybody speaks English. Some people speak Irish, some people speak Irish as a first language, but everybody speaks English. And paganism here was pretty much eradicated, and it has only really come back in the last 70-odd years. And it's made a big resurgence in the last 20 or 30 years. But, when people are trying to tell you that, there's this ancient Irish culture that has continued sort of uninterrupted, they're just gaslighting you, okay? Because even in the Gaeltacht areas, 99% of the people living in the Gaeltacht are Catholics. Catholic Christian people. They wouldn't call themselves pagan. There's a very, very tiny number of people who would claim to be from a pagan family. Minuscule. And even those people with an interest in the ancient culture, the old books, the old oral tradition, the vast majority of them would have called themselves Christians. They would just have continued some of the traditions that come from the pagan past. So you want to be really careful listening to people who are trying to create this impression of Ireland and saying that they represent the pagan community, that they represent this kind of lineage, if you like, because it doesn't exist. This lineage does not exist. There might be half a dozen people scattered across the country who have a genuine historical and family link into a pagan past. The vast majority of people who are pagans here, and I'm talking nearly everybody, have come to paganism in the last century or in this century. And that's just the way it is. That is the truth, the reality of the situation. So most of these people may have a small community, a group of Wiccans that you meet up with, a group of Druids that you meet up with, perhaps there might be online groups, there might be what's called a moot, where people meet in your local town. There are small gatherings of pagans, and these are very, very tiny. There might be 10, 20 people, 30 people, if you're lucky. In some of the cities, there might be bigger ones. There's a group called Pagans in the Pub that meets up in Dublin, I've never actually been to it, but I think there's quite a lot of people go to that. And it'll be a mixture of people. They might not all be of one particular grouping. Some of them might be heathens, some of them might be Wiccans, some might be Druids, etc. But generally, you have particular groupings of your particular path that you follow, that people tend to gather together. So there isn't a homogeneous community at all. There are some umbrella organisations that seek to give a sort of bit of continuity and support to the entire pagan community. But of course, they can't actually sort of effectively represent all these groups in the same way, because they have different beliefs, and not every single one of these organizations has someone from each different path within paganism. You know, they might have a Wiccan, and they might possibly have a shaman, but they may not have a druid, or they may not have someone who follows heathenry. I don't think any of them that I know of have currently someone that represents every pagan path that exists in Ireland. So that's not to say that the situation might not change in the future, and I suppose as paganism grows, things will change, but it is still very much a minority here, very minority spirituality, and the kind of links between people, the sort of community, if you like, are very small and very tentative. So I just felt it was really important to try and correct this false impression that some people give about this homogeneous, sort of integrated pagan community that exists in Ireland, and giving the impression that there are, you know, huge amounts of people in Ireland are sort of involved in that and in touch with their pagan past, or etc. Because that really is not the case at all. It's a very, very small community of people. Most people don't know that much about Irish history, about Irish culture, about the pagan past, or about pagan practices today. The vast majority of people historically here have been either Catholic or Protestant. The number of different religions is growing, and the number of people leaving, particularly the Catholic Church, has increased enormously in the last 30 years or so. But still, as a proportion of the country, I mean, 10,000 out of well, something like 5 million people in the last census. That, you know, that's what we're talking about, a very, very, very small community, which isn't actually sort of fully connected, you know. So anyway, that's all I have to say on that matter. I hope that clears things up for people who have misconceptions, which have actually been encouraged by some people, unfortunately. They haven't been absolutely honest about how things are here. So that's all I have to say for now. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.